Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. My name is Mariko Middleton. I am the office manager here at All Souls Interfaith Gathering. I'm so thankful that all of you are here with us today. I am here to welcome you to the second event in the three-part series, Conversations with Fran Stoddard. The theme of this conversation series is Relationships Across Difference, which is a continuing partnership of Shelburne Farms, Shelburne Museum, the Pierson Library, and All Souls. The series explores the intersection of art, spirituality, and nature. A special thank you to RETN for filming and making this possible for our communities, as well as the Vermont Humanities Council, who provided funding for this programming tonight. And so now I will turn it over to Fran Stoddard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mariko. No, this is the second. It was going to be the first. Last week, that was the last, became the first, the conversations. So last week, it was the connection between humans and nature. This is the bridging the difference between faith. And next time, which is not next week, but the 11th of April, will be human to human. So two of the finest mediators in our state will be talking about how to bridge differences in communities, between in a divorce situation and or in across races, gender, whatever. They are truly remarkable. But to our incredibly rich panel of guests tonight, I will introduce them, and we will have a lively discussion about faith and meeting at that crossroads. We talked about that a lot when we came up with this. And so now it's actually very fitting for many. It's Holy Week is coming up. So we will connect around faith and belief. So a little bit about our panel. Melissa O'Brien. She is the pastor of the Pawlet Community Church in southern Vermont. She is also a hospice chaplain with the VNA, the Vermont and New Hampshire VNA, right? And a student at Fordham School of Religion and Religious Education. She's also a photographer, a writer, a blogger, and the new editor of the Charlotte News, which may limit her volunteering as a hospice chaplain at the Mount Mansfield Interfaith Church.
Or it sounds ridiculous, I know, yeah. Once I hear it.
Or her hospice volunteer services. So it's great to have her here. I'll introduce everybody and then we'll begin the conversation. Taysir Al-Khatib is the president of the Vermont Islamic Society. He is also an IBM hardware engineer, originally from Jordan. And I know that the Islamic Society is very excited about a new imam that they have been an open search for, at least 6 to 8 months?
7 months.
7 months, who will begin on April 1st. So congratulations to your society, and thank you so much for coming today. Coming this way, Rabbi Jan Sazman was ordained in 2010 by the Alliance for Jewish Renewal. She's the founder and rabbi of the congregation, and I need you to pronounce it.
Ruach HaMoqom.
Ruach HaMoqom.
Spirit of the place.
Located in the historic synagogue of Little Jerusalem in the Old North End on Archibald Street. Probably many of you know that beautiful synagogue in Burlington. Previously, she served as the assistant rabbi for the Ohavi Zedek Synagogue. Rabbi Jan has lived in Vermont for over 35 years, is married, and has 2 grown children, and soon to be a grandmother
My
second time.
daughter-in-law is in labor now.
And I think we have parents all around. You have children?
Me?
Yeah.
Great-grandchildren.
So we all are very proud parents. I know that. Bidur Dahal is the founding director of the Vermont Hindu Temple, established in 2015 to protect, preserve the unique cultural, religious, and spiritual identity, and support a smooth settlement for Bhutanese Nepali, that community. And just to put that in perspective a little bit, in the early 90s, Bidur was in his mid-teens when his family fled Bhutan with 120,000 other Bhutanese Nepali people. Bhutan's king had started an ethnic cleansing policy by evicting Nepali-speaking population. So after living in a refugee camp in Nepal for nearly 2 decades, Bidur's family resettled in the United States in 2011. Mr. Dahal has worked as a school liaison in Burlington, as a medical case manager for the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program, as a navigator for the Vermont Health Connect, and currently is working as an outreach professional at UVM's Pediatrics Department and is pursuing his second master's degree.
You're not bored, are you?
What a panel. So we thank you all, and we also thank Kaylin Sullivan Two Trees was not able to make this date, nor was Bidur Dahal, who were both on the panel. So we are thank you to Taysir and to Rabbi Jan for joining us tonight. I would like to begin to have each of you share for just a minute or two your spiritual journey. How did you begin? Were you brought up in the religion you are in now? And how does that faith, how is it with you today? So I know this is unfair. This could take all day for each of you, but just that spiritual journey, and then we'll get into things, more specific things about your religion, and we'll go down this way. So do you want to begin?
Thank you, Fran. Thank you so much for having me here. It's such a great pleasure to be here and speaking in front of the great audience and with a lot of colleagues who are doing a great job in the community. Before I start answering you, I would like to quickly recognize some of the friends I've come with. Our priest here, Madhusudan, and Nitin, who is our yoga guru, and Dil Bradhaki, who is also another priest in the temple. And especially, I'm so great to see Howard Seaver here and Mrs. Seaver, who actually helped us in establishing the Vermont Hindu Temple by guiding us writing the bylaws. So he is our guidance for everything. So thank you. I'm so happy to be received. So.
Right.
Now, going back to your question, how about this spiritual journey. I was born in a family, in Hindu family, and my father is a priest.
He's a priest.
He's a priest. And my grandfather was also a priest. So there is a whole, family history of having into that religion.
Yes.
So that's how I started, and basically Bhutan, where we were before, there were basically two types of faiths, Buddhism and Hinduism, and all Hindus used to live in the southern belt, and normally all Buddhists live in the northern belt. So that is how, and so we all practiced, and we had temples, and in all the villages, all places. So it was how it just evolved, and because of that, family history, I was born there and I grew up in that culture. So that's how I'm today. So.
And you are today. Thank you. Thank you. And Jan.
Like many kids of the 60s, I was raised in a conservative synagogue, but lived a very secular life and left Judaism the day of my bat mitzvah. Could not wait to get as far away as possible. And just fully assimilated into the American culture. I'm third generation Jew in America, but clearly there was a spiritual longing, and I was introduced to something called Jewish renewal, and it was a portal through which I could re-enter my faith tradition, and much to my surprise, became a rabbi. It's very fulfilling to help other people find their portal back in. Post-Holocaust American Jewry, it was pretty dead. I mean, the Judaism had really suffered in a lot of ways. That post-mortem, it was trying to wake up again, But like after the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, it took about 2 or 3 generations for people's wounds to begin to heal a little bit. And so the form of Judaism that arose was born in America based on equal access under the law and feminist theory and the natural world, and including the rest of the body in our worship, and just a variety of things, and bringing the sweetness, the juice of what it was to be a Jew before the Holocaust.
Wow.
So that rung something in me, and
Here you are, a rabbi. Taysir.
All right, from the name you can tell I was forced to be Muslim. Oh, I'm just kidding. So my name is Taysir Al-Khatib. Al-Khatib means an imam. So we came from many generations of imams, which is a priest or rabbi, whatever the faith is. So I grew up in a family where the parents are very religious, and the generation and history of my ancestors were people who preaching. So this is how I grew up in that environment, and continue to do that. So I had to study how to become an imam, and that was in my DNA. So I have researched myself. I didn't go to school for the religious. I went to school for something else. But I do self-research and self-study. So when our imam leaves, so I'll take his position. So I can deliver the sermon on Fridays. This is how became the standby imam until we see the first one. Thank God to take that heavy responsibility on April 1st.
Great, thank you. Melissa.
I was raised in the Catholic faith. My great uncle was a priest in the Albany area. I grew up in Saratoga Springs, New York. Our family went to church every Sunday my whole life until I made my confirmation. And my parents said, well, now it's really up to you. You can choose to go to church or not. And that was the end of that for me. But going to church all those years laid the foundation for my life as a seeker. I think I carried religious curiosity with me wherever I went. And it was 5 years ago this week, actually, it was on Good Friday in 2013, when the son of a dear friend of mine was in a really horrific accident and ended up in the ICU at Fletcher Allen on life support. And I was called to be with him during that time because the rest of his family was very far away. It was a transformative experience for me. I didn't know it in those hours, but in the aftermath, after he was removed from life support the next day, he died very shortly after. I knew, and I still don't know why, it's a really beautiful mystery, but I knew that I had to get back to the hospital. And so the first thing that I did was to go through the what's called Clinical Pastoral Education Training Program at Fletcher Allen, 8 months of sort of learning how to become a hospital chaplain, learning more about myself. At the end of that, I decided to apply to seminary because my religious questions and yearnings were just growing and growing. And I really wanted a cohort. I needed other people I could sort of try to unearth the treasure, I think, probably that I was seeking with. So I applied to Andover Newton, and right after I applied to seminary, I was called to serve a church. Every part of my journey has been a total mystery, and I've gone in through the side door everywhere I've gone. So I was called to serve this beautiful little community church in southern Vermont. I started seminary. Andover Newton started shutting down. They sold their campus and merged with Yale Divinity School. I transferred to Fordham, and I also went through hospice training during that time. And so now I do a little of all those things. I serve the church, and I work as a hospice chaplain. It is a kind of funny thing that I also am a newspaper editor. But the way I would kind of draw that all together is by saying that every part of those different aspects of my life are about listening to people tell their stories. A big part of all of that is everyone sharing in their personal narratives. And spending time, a lot of time sitting with people at their kitchen table and listening to whatever it is that they're struggling with. And my faith journey, for me, it's, I've been doing these things for about 5 years, and I'm just getting warmed up as far as I can tell. Right. I don't really know what's in store.
Interesting that 3 out of 4 had parents who were ministers, priests. Very interesting from this. So this is another discussion that could happen all day, but I'm interested in, as we kind of explore the religions, what are the 1 or 2 things that you feel people outside your religions misunderstand or need to know? So let's start making that bridge right here, and I'm going to start with Jan, and we're going to kind of change up who we begin this conversation with. So Jan, would you start with, what do people not get that you wish they would?
What people usually don't get is that Jews do not live according to the Bible. We have never, probably in the thousands of years that it's been the collected campfire tales, we don't take it literally. It's always been taken metaphorically, looking for meaning. And the real split came when the Second Temple was destroyed. Again, I mentioned this, it was a monumental moment. 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the temple. And at that point, there was no longer a cultic center for people to carry out the offerings. And already, even like 100 BCE, the rabbis had already begun to develop how to have a faith tradition in the absence of a cultic center. If you roll the clock even further back, 586 BCE, the first temple was destroyed, and we were exiled to what is modern-day Damascus. So there's this constant curiosity about how to live not near our cultic center or having it be destroyed. And so we developed the rabbinic conversation. So Jews have lived rabbinically for 2,000 years, not biblically. So what does that mean? The rabbinic conversation is, it's a sieve through which to put contemporary social change. So how do you live in a changing world and live in accordance with the core of who you are? So what's the sieve through which you put change? And it's the rabbinic conversation, previously mostly men, but now of course women are involved in that, to try and figure out, well, what do you do in these new situations? Because we are a people, by definition, of exile. So that's as Christianity arose, they saw the Hebrew Bible as something that was literal because it was predicting the rising of Christianity. But Jews don't take it literally, and that's probably the most misunderstood thing, because people think, oh, well, it says in the Bible that you knock out somebody's eye if someone knocks your eye out, and it's like, I'm sorry, like that just doesn't. It's what's the value of an eye? So it's basically personal injury and workman's comp, okay? So it's always been about what is the meaning, and especially the last thing I'll say is that because it's written in Hebrew, such an ancient language, and the feeling, of course, is that every letter is another face of God. There's a theological, not much theology in Judaism. But there's a tradition that we think that every letter was the name of a face of God. So we're always delving into like the actual letters and how can we wrest a little bit more meaning? So Torah becomes the mirror for our lives, as well as how do we absorb modern social change, because we're always finding ourselves in different situations. So I think we do not live biblically. We live in an ongoing conversation.
Thank you. Taysir, things
Well,
that
I
are
will say,
misunderstood.
I'm sorry, there's say 2 things people don't understand Islam. And right away when they said you're Muslim, they always violent. Second one, we don't respect women. Those are 2 major things I hear a lot from people. And to explain this, the Quran stated, whoever killed one innocent person like he killed all humanity. Whoever saved one person, save all humanity, okay? The other thing is about women. We put women down. We put them up, we cover them. No, you gotta understand, there are cultural and there is religion. The culture is way different than religion. For instance, let's take Afghanistan. Women cover themselves, only the eyes showing. No, that's not Islam, that's cultural, you understand? Women have the choice to cover their hair or they don't, okay? Quran says you better cover your hair, but if you don't, it's allowable. It's all modesty. A woman should wear modesty. I'll tell you, my mother is the boss in our house. So don't tell me the women are putting down. No, we never. I mean, you come to our mosque and you see the women are driving a lot of issues more than the men. They took a huge role in the society. So those misconceptions, back to the violent. Islam means peace. And I'm sure you're going to hear other people say, look what they're fighting, what other stuff like that. That does not exist in Islam. The real Muslim, and the Prophet says, al-Muslim, I will say in Arabic, man salima an-nasu min lisanihi wa yadihi. The Muslim, the real Muslim, who people be aware from his tongue and his hand. That's the real Muslim, who is careful what he says and careful how he deal with people. So that's the real Islam. Islam means peaceful. And that's where our Islamic Society of Vermont, we have over 22 different nationalities, and we all live in peace.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Melissa, things that might be misunderstood or that other faiths should understand about yours.
Well, the Pawlet Community Church is a UCC, United Church of Christ Church. And when people ask me what that is, usually the way I explain it is by saying on the sort of spectrum of Christianity or Protestantism, it's one of the most liberal of the faith traditions that, a lot of the UCC churches in Vermont have a rainbow flag or a rainbow, sort of banner in front of the building. And the sense that is meant to be conveyed is that all are welcome all the time. I think in general, when I think about people's reluctance to attend church, I think a lot of times it comes from a place of feeling they're not ready or they're not good enough yet or they don't belong inside that building. And in many ways, I wish we could just do away with the buildings themselves because it can be very scary to cross the threshold into a church. But what you find inside, hopefully, is a community of seekers, of people who are learning as they go, uncertain perhaps of what it's all about. And I think in my own experience, one of the reasons why it has worked well for me to be a pastor and for our congregation is that I have always been very, very honest that I don't have the answers. I think that's another piece of that answer to that question is that we don't have the answers. We are hopefully good conduits of what it is that God is needing us to be. At least I should probably speak for myself. But we are on this path of enlightenment as well, and a good, healthy congregation does that together.
Great, thank you. Basu, what do people not understand about
Bidur.
Hinduism? Oh, Bidur. Sorry.
It's similar.
Not at all. Go ahead.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Like my friend, I did not go to the religious school to study. I studied different. I studied environmental science in bachelor's degree, master's degree. And I'm doing my public health course now. So it's all different. Two things again. First is Hindu religion has caste system. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. Another thing, I'm going to confuse you guys. It's Hindu, the name itself Hindu. That is actually misunderstood. Mm. Okay, so the first one, caste system, again, it is very similar to what my friend said. Religion and culture are two different things. So caste system actually was I think over the time it was, evolved eventually, but the actual was a work distribution initially, what Vedas has said in the early religious texts. That is what I have understood so far, is it was originally a distribution of work into 4 different categories. So you do diplomacy something, you do the fine art, you do the metal thing, and you do the war. So there were distribution of work among the that is what we have understood so far. So it was actually a work distribution, but eventually it got into different, it got differently, and it became a culture later on, and then people change it to like, okay, you are doing that job, you are now higher caste. You are doing this job, now you are lower caste. Yeah. So it eventually became something different. So the caste system exists, it is there, but actually it is much misunderstood how it actually came down up to this level.
Right.
So that's one thing. Another piece is Hindu. Actually, the real name of Hindu religion is Vedic Sanatan Dharma. Vedic Sanatan Dharma. But Hindu was called by, it was actually imposed by some other people than the real people who belong to Vedic Sanatan Dharma. So basically, it evolved in Indian subcontinent. The religion was very. So what happened was, when Muslim invaders came, when British colonials came, then they eventually said, like, there is a river called Sindhu River. So people, eventually it was changed somehow, and then people started saying Hindu in place of Shindu. So Hindu. So it was easy for them to say like Hindu. Okay, everybody's Hindu. So it got changed.
Yeah.
And I think they need to really understand Vedic Sanatan Dharma. And Vedic Sanatan Dharma encompasses lot of religion within that also. Jainism, other thing, a lot that are within Sikhism. So there are other religions who are part of the Vedic Sanatan Dharma. So Hindu basically says he means Himalaya, Hindu means ocean. So anybody who is living within Himalaya and ocean, so we all live. So it's a way of life actually. It's a secular term. Hindu is a secular term actually in my perspective. So anybody who lives between these two places are all Hindus. Okay, so I think that those two are the very misunderstood by people.
And then just a clarification, someone reminded me, is Buddha was Hindu.
Yeah, Buddhism.
So so that grew out of Hinduism, of course, and there are many religions we are not representing here, but I would bring that up because you are that also in your part of the world, in India and in Bhutan, Buddhism is, of course, a major religion then. So, we have so many wonderful things to look after. So one thing that is of interest to me is that, according to statistics, Vermont is the least religious state in the U.S. And I'm wondering if it's difficult to talk with fellow Vermonters about faith or spiritual beliefs. Is that kind of lack of a faith-based foundation? Has that been a problem with communicating about your own faith? About death when you're dealing with hospice, if people have not been in a faith tradition, about hardship because life is hard and people might be seekers but they're not sure where to go. So again, maybe not everyone, but I thought, Melissa, I would start with you on this one. Just you're kind of dealing with that, with churches becoming something else, or and just that sense, is there a difference in Vermont about the religion in this state and talking to people about spirit and religion?
Yeah, I think it definitely has an effect on, it certainly has in my own life, really. Most of my peers don't go to church. A lot of them have children who play soccer on Sunday mornings. I have noticed, I will say, and I think, I'd like to think that it's a trend. I have noticed that recently people have been asking me, I'm looking for a faith community. Can you recommend one in the Burlington area? So I believe there is maybe a beginning of, and I'm sure that it has to do with the nature of our lives and all the things that are happening in the world. People are seeking something and they might not know yet what they're seeking. But I think that some people are willing to believe they might find it in a faith community. So yes, I do think that Vermont is probably one of those places where people tend to call themselves spiritual, or they do other things. They spend time outdoors, they take yoga classes, whatever the case is, that brings them closer to whatever it is they're seeking, rather than church is not part of that. I also think that a lot of people have had negative experiences in the past in regards to church, maybe, and that has kept them as adults from returning. I think sometimes, like finding a good therapist, maybe it's very difficult to find a church that feels right, or a synagogue or a temple that feels right. It can take some time. Not many people are going into the ministry. That's another piece of it too. I don't know anyone in my own world who is choosing to study theology or to become a pastor or is drawn to it in any way. So there's probably not as many young people moving in that direction. That informs the kind of energy that you find in a church experience. In terms of the work that I do or the time that I spend with people who are dying, I think I can probably say that most people, as they move closer to that stage of life, become more curious, I think. Probably for a lot of different reasons, I think, that most of us can figure out, right? Once you're coming to that place where you're crossing the threshold, and no one, of course, knows where you go, right? Or what happens when you die. But I think people become more curious, and I also think that your defenses are they're just, might not be the right way to describe it, but you're a more open human being when you have suffered, when you are in, a lot of people at times in the hospital too are more willing to pray or more interested in it. But certainly I think as we move closer to the final stages of our lives, the curiosity tends to get a little bit amped up, and I, of course, love having those kinds of conversations. I don't know what happens when we die. I have no idea. I always sort of thought if I started my own church, I would call it the church of the best guess. I mean, that's what we're all doing, right? We're making our best guess. We don't really know. It's faith. It's a beautiful thing if you choose to embrace it, I think. So yeah.
So other thoughts pop up about being a spiritual leader in Vermont. Yoga was brought up, but what pops into your mind?
This is an interesting question because we, as Bhutanese refugee, basically majority of us are Hindu faith-based community. We were resettled from the beginning of 2008. So we are pretty much new, and we don't know much about history, everything, what has happened before here. So I'm not in a position to say whether it is religiously different or it is. We have not even gone out of that because we were. I would like to just add here why we actually started Vermont Hindu Temple. There is no physical temple so far. Also, we have rented a room in a big building, and we have just made some structures and we pray there. So I think this, I don't have to explain too much about why. So given the situation there, so what happened was back there we were automatically, we didn't have to worry about worshiping or going to temple or anything. They were already there. Like people here go to the different churches and synagogues or wherever because they are already there. We just have to be present. But here we had another level of challenge because we were majority kind of culture there, and we didn't have to worry about those parts. We just have to be present. Now coming here, we got into such a small, teeny tiny population, and with a different culture in a new place, totally new. So people started actually, and why was now the basic thing what we demanded back in Bhutan was our culture, to practice our culture, to follow our religion, to follow our language, and wear our dress. And those were the things king denied and kicked us out. And then we were in Nepal as refugee, but interestingly, but fortunately, Nepal, we were ethnically Nepali, so we share the same culture, same language. So we didn't have to worry so much, even though we were living in the refugee camp. And we have a temple, we had a small, Buddhist, we call the Gomba, So, and there were Christian churches within small periphery, within not even 1 square miles. We had everything within the refugee camp. So we could just go in everywhere. Now, what I'm saying is, we didn't have to struggle so much to keep our identity and our culture and our religion. We were there. Now, coming here, we had tons of challenges now. And people started feeling like, oh, this is not okay. Then something is wrong. Though we have small things, a small temple kind of thing in our corner or in our room, in our house where we live, we rent or we own it. But, going to temple has a different meaning, So people did not feel happy generally. So what we thought, even like doctors say, now people say they have pain somewhere. Now we go through all the tests and screenings and all the things. We don't find anything. What is going on? So they started questioning us. And then we had a discussion, and finally people said, we don't have any place to go and worship together, see? So we thought of keeping, having a temple, at least start legally, so that one step forward, just take one step at a time. So we just started and thought about okay, let's just do something. And interestingly, again, I want to connect back with Howard. He was a family, friend of one of our community friends, and then we got connected, and then there was a guidance, and we started and established, this temple.
And is your community healthier now?
They feel great because you see, we have around 40 different cultural festivals in a year. And even if you miss one, they say, no, you guys are not doing good. So we need to celebrate. So there is a demand so much, and we have a place, at least if it's a room. And then see, many of our friends have joined Holi, and we have been celebrating that Holi Color Festival every year. And we have been very welcoming to all the people. Anybody who comes, everybody is welcome. So that is how we live together, and our community is so happy to have everybody there. It's not, nobody has to be hesitant to go and visit the temple. They are all time welcome. So that is the piece. So what I feel personally, I'm taking more time, but I think what I'm saying, Vermont, I think there is a difference in religious and spirituality, I think. So you don't need to be religious to be a spiritual person. So I think there is a difference between spirituality and compassion and empathy. So, and religion, being just a religious person does not mean that he's compassionate or empathetic.
And Vermont seems to have at least that spiritual base,
given our situation, we feel that there are people who care. There are people who don't care also, who say a lot of things to us also. But we have come through different times and different difficult phases in our lives. And we have been the victims of racial, cleansing policy, racism. But we have a lot of resilience, and we forgive. Okay, you do it because that's not a gift for us.
Right.
Take back your gift. If you are thinking differently, take it back. So we believe that skin color is just a skin thick. Beyond that is nothing. Everything, whatever you absorb, it's your mind. It's not a skin color or anything, right?
Thank you. So I can tell I'm not going to get to half my questions, but many of them are being answered as we move forward. Something that came up for either one of you around this
Well,
issue
you
of
know,
being practicing in Vermont.
I lived in East Barnard in North Pomfret, Vermont for 30 some odd years, and I was like the only Jew in town. So it was not as much that the people around me, they were very active in the East Barnard Church, and it was a community center. They were, I don't know what their religiosity was, but it was a pulsing part of living in rural Vermont. And I've only recently come up to the big city of Burlington. And so I was the curiosity. So people, I can pass for white, but I'm a Jew, so like people found out, oh my God, So anyways, so the people were asking me questions, and I didn't know some of the answers, so that was one of the reasons why I went to rabbinical schools, because I didn't know all the answers, but I still don't know all the answers. But as an ethnic minority in Vermont, people are curious about us because they had never seen a Jew, or they had never known someone who was Jewish. And so it was more about being able to reflect back to them their questions and their curiosities, because they had never had a conversation with someone who was Jewish. And always sweet and gentle and curious, but just, so I don't know what the rest of Vermont does, but I know that as an ethnic minority here in the state, it actually helps me to stand up a little bit more and educate people about who are the Jews and what are the, and there's like so many different ways, like you said, there are many, many different ways to Jew. It's a verb, it's not a noun, so, and so the other thing I want to say is that when you're involved in your own faith tradition, you don't feel like everybody else isn't, So it's like when you're in your either ethnic minorities or religious minorities or whatever it is, the people with whom you are engaging are engaged, right? And so I don't know what else. Yeah. Well, I'll just say that.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, we're also talking about it's a piece of identity, and there's all this identity politics, and who are you, and are you Christian, Hindu, are you a man or a woman, are you native, are you an immigrant? All of these things have become so heightened these days. So that kind of that piece.
Well, if I can respond to that for just a second. So it's a really interesting experience of how many generations have you and your people been in America. So, you're first generation, I'm third generation. You look at the assimilation that happens as it goes on, and the parents and the grandparents try and hold on to the kids, but they got their their earbuds in their ears. So it's a frightening thing. It's exciting. It's also it really feeds some new vitamins into one's faith tradition to be in America. If you think about it in that way, it's good vitamins, but it's a very different experience depending on what generation you are of immigration. I would say that most people who are in Vermont have been here, or at least they're white, they've been here for a while. So I think how many generations you are from where you came from is a factor.
And we hope to get to that whole piece on ancestors. So, Taysir, I have a question I want to start with you. But if you had something that's burning about this conversation.
Yeah, I want to say a few things. Back in '93, we're trying to find a place to worship, and it was so. I will relate to the Jewish story, like Muslims. Wow, in Vermont, that is bizarre. How could you have a Muslim in Vermont? And people say, we went to towns to try to get a permit to have a place, and we were rejected. We had to have a lawyer interfere to get a permit to worship. So it was not easy. And we started with 5 people in Vermont. We're 5 Muslims. I am one of them at that time. I'm the founder. So at that time, we bought a place. It was a computer place. It was bankrupt. So we took over that place as a mosque And we bought now the rest of the building. But that time was we hit a lot of walls to penetrate through to get a place, because the town says, I don't think so. I said, well, come on. You have so many churches in here. There was very few synagogues at that time, you know. Are you afraid we're not paying taxes? So we're not profit. So we started actually, it took us a while to get a nonprofit. It was just, we struggled a lot in the beginning, but now I think the door is wide open for us.
It's good to hear. Well, the question I was going to come next to, and I'll ask one or two maybe more questions, open it up. We also have, I've asked everybody there will be a prayer and a little chant, just short from each of these traditions, which is really wonderful. So, you know, intolerant and fundamentalist religious beliefs have been, of course, the cause of violence and wars throughout human history, it seems. And people of faith come together at gatherings such as these, who can really reach across and find those commonalities. So I'm wondering if there was a time, very specific story, when you had trouble with someone because of differing faiths or beliefs. Were you able to overcome it? What are the recommendations about how to best behave or operate in that difficult crossroad? So if you, because this is really kind of that bridge, relationship across difference. So there's an issue, and even it might be, you know, later I was going to talk about interfaith marriage, because that just, people get really, and here we have a couple of wonderful examples. So Taysir, I know you're married to a Christian woman, but we don't have to go to marriage. But just how do we meet at that crossroads of two different religions, and how do they live together in marriage or in friendship or at work or whatever?
Yeah, well, you know, Islam taught us kind, love, tolerance. How could you live with someone different than your religion? How you show them your affection, the way you've been raised. And I think it's all about the way you've been raised as a Muslim, as you are kind to your family, because my father was very kind to my mother, so you kind of grow up that atmosphere. And this is how you deal with your sister as a female and male, and how you respect each other. So you grow up in that beautiful kindness and love family. Then, you know, if you don't have it, you can't give it, right? So that's how, it doesn't matter which faith you're married to. In Islam, you can marry, doesn't have to be a Muslim, as far as the two can meet in a good relationship with kindness and love. Like my wife and I have been married 31 years. She is Christian, I'm Muslim. We celebrate both holidays. The most holidays, the better. Who doesn't want more gifts and more love and more food? Come on. So that's kind of opened up the discussion. I mean, when I met her mother, she was concerned, and I can understand that, because somebody from a different country, different religions, that's two hit in the head, it's hard. So once she understands who I am, now I'm a better driver than my wife, all of a sudden, within 2 weeks. So it takes that kind of, I think, we put I think the religious taught us how, our Islam religion taught us how to be kind, loving, caring, understanding different faith and religion, and how to deal with it in a very beautiful way.
Okay. Other things that have come up, Jan.
To answer your question is well, how do I work with anybody who is from a different state? I mean, my format is to listen, to ask a question, and then listen to the answer, and not look for places where I can say, oh yeah, well, ours does it differently, but oh, you know, in our faith, this is how we address that question. And so, you know, it's the, you know, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. You know, it's the, I really want to find those places of commonality in the interfaith dialogue. We're all set up to think that if someone comes from a different place, that we're supposed to be in some kind of animosity with each other. But in fact, I'm curious, you know, what does what do you think about something? And here's what I think about something, and then we seek that place of commonality. And if we can't find the commonality, we're not working hard enough. So, and there may be a lot of places we just aren't going to agree, but we can create an interfaith dialogue or an intercultural dialogue by just listening and being present, and not feel like I have to convince you that my way is the right way. And so, there's a lot of, especially with religion, when it's associated with an army, that it's like my way or the highway. Like there's this brutality that is engendered when you think that the way, you're either with me or against me. And that's a real problem. And so I want to just hear what you have to say, and let's find those places that are common.
Bidur, and then I'll get to you. One of the things in coming and feeling very welcomed at your holy celebration, there's something where, and I'm sorry, you might want to go somewhere else, but there's something about also going to a place, another person's place of worship, that can feel very uncomfortable. People that were brought up Christian can hardly walk through walk into some churches because they feel awkward. You seem very open there. That seems to be one of the places in the crossroads. So, but what came up for you around when there was difficulty and you were open, and that connection between you and around your religion and someone else of another religion really clicked?
I think there is a history also behind this acceptance level being very wide in the community. Normally, when you say refugee, people sometimes misunderstand that they're very much, put in a very small place and all that, and very narrow and all that. But looking back at this history, in this school back in Bhutan, we studied. I studied personally, and a lot of us did, Buddhist, text. We read together. We practice at home the Hindu religion, and our education system designer were fathers, Catholic fathers, and pastors from different Western countries.
Right.
And so there was a mixture of all the things there, Buddhism, Hinduism, and interestingly, Bhutan did not allow to practice Christianity there, and there were no Muslims.
But your teachers were Catholic priests.
Catholic from Ireland, from a lot of
clarifying that, right?
So, but the Bhutan's original education system who designed were Catholic, and some fathers. We call them fathers, but I don't know. I think now I understand they were, Catholic fathers. And they were given the name of son of Bhutan also. But when he died, he was cremated in another country, because what I understand that from that perspective, had he been cremated in Bhutan, Bhutan would have to establish a church and accept in the name of that. So there was some element in the king's court, But the thing is, in general, in a day-to-day life practice, we were all kind of together. And coming to Nepal, now in Kathmandu, if you have visited Kathmandu, you go to Buddhist temple there, and all Hindus, all Buddhists go there, all in temples, everybody is like that. So there is mosque here in Kathmandu. There are religious other places all around there. So. And again, I studied in a Catholic college, and we had, priests and pastors, and some of our family members have become, Christians also, and one of my uncles is a pastor. So see, there is a whole level of acceptance, and coming to refugee camp, I already said, within small places, we all have places to worship, and we respected that. So, I think that gave us so much level of acceptance that we are basically what we are, and we accept what you do, and ultimately we are community members.
And you can have that conversation with anyone.
Yeah.
Anything come up for you?
Yeah, actually, So in my role as a hospice chaplain, I visit with a couple who live in Tunbridge who are Mormons. And I will confess that when I first started visiting with them several months ago, I literally thought, really, there are Mormons in Vermont? Like, this isn't very even close to Utah, you know. And I was so illiterate. I had no idea. It was ridiculous. And they're very deeply religious. Their faith is everything to them. And just the other day, the woman and I started asking her a lot of questions about how they practice, about what they believe, about, you know, really the Mormon tradition. And some things really resonated with me, and you know, when she started talking about, well, you know, women cannot be pastors or ministers, it's men who are chosen for those roles, I found myself feeling, you know, that's not right, you know, and I had this inner dialogue with myself, having to remind myself to be open-minded, and it really, curiosity, as was already said, has got to be the propelling force in our lives. It's not it's not and or, it's and. And your religious experience and your interpretation and your understanding of all of it expands my world and my belief and what I might be able to come to understand. And so I found myself really, I don't have the answers, and I had to remind myself I don't have the answers. I know what I believe and all of that, but what this other person believes is as important as what I believe. And she is a teacher for me as well. And we ended our time together that morning with a really beautiful prayer in which we both shared in our gratitude for being open-minded and compassionate in each other's presence. And so I really felt like this is really how it has to be. It's not and or, it's not you versus me, it's and. And that's what makes it beautiful.
Thank you. Usually the audience has some burning question. I'm open to one or two. I want to respect the time. We'll go for another 5 or 10 minutes, and we will close with 4 prayers and or chants, or what has been brought to us that will be also brief, but I think that's an important part of today. Anything come up for people that it's like, oh, I have to ask this question? Yes.
Well, I had an experience today. I'm talking to my daughter who lives outside of New York City, and she joined a new group of young parents, and she said that they had to sign an agreement that they would not talk about politics or religion. And in this conversation, and because obviously it came up because I was telling her I was coming tonight, and I thought, that's so sad, but it's kind of how, because of the violations obviously put in place because of the, as you say, either or, how to guide a young person who's in that situation to be able to have a dialogue that's not non-threatening about different religions, because she lives in a very culturally mixed area.
Really great question. Yes, my parents never, you know, come to the dinner table and talk about anything except politics and religion. It's like, really?
Well, you didn't grow up in my family, that's for sure. I grew up in a very political family. What came to mind when you were describing your daughter's situation is, if you look at a page of Talmud, which is the notes of a conversation that took place over 600 years and continues today, what you see is the conversations of the rabbis around like a little piece of text, and then the rabbi, whatever one rabbi said, you know, in 600 that his words were written, and maybe somebody added something in 1000 and somebody added something in 1400, and nobody agrees with each other. So it's a format of how to talk about a single line of text and respectfully hear what your teacher said and then go the exact opposite. So when you study Jewish text, what you really get is this salon of people who engage in the deliciousness of the dialogue and of the dialectic, but with no, hardly ever any attachment to an outcome, because it was in the decision, it was in the conversation that was the juice, and not whose answer was right. And in fact, the most elevated rabbis were the ones who first could state my opponent's point of view before stating mine. So what we're missing in our culture, and one of the things that I think we've all seen from these kids from Florida, is why have they been able to do everything that, how come people weren't like marching in the streets with Sandy Hook, right? So it's because each one of those kids took a class in debate. And they are not afraid of conversations. So my answer, so the model that I have is, I'm exactly here to come up with another idea. That's my model, but I don't have to convince you I'm right. Because there's no, maybe it's because Jews didn't have, any civic, we didn't have control over our lives for thousands of years, but we really had control over our minds. And so we may not have run the courts, but we definitely wanted to discern meaning in the world. So that Talmudic model is fabulous for engendering conversation that doesn't have to have an answer.
Other thoughts about having young people?
I normally talk long, sorry, but I tend to give background so that it's better. So my thought is pretty much the same as what my friend said. Politics, I think we all know it's about majority, it's about influence, about superiority. I'm better than that party, or I'm better than another one. So that definitely is the model of politics. I think that is what I understand. And that has to be done in order to get the votes, I think. Now, when we talk about the religion, I think exactly that should be the model. Let us respect each other. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a compassion. Let's have a respect, humility, acceptance for each other. Let us not compete over each other, right? So I think if that model is accepted, and politics is different, if those two are a little bit understood, make them understand, have a dialogue about those things, rather than totally forbidding to talk about those, I think that's important. Another is, I think just religion, I think spiritually religious. Religion sometimes is, misinterpreted. But if you add spiritual religiousness in that, I think you are totally, enlightened.
Some people, we can talk about morality in specific religion or whatever. What comes to mind for you about how you work with young people?
Oh, I work with a lot of people, and I think the best time to discuss religion with people at break time, not when you are working. Because when you are working, your mind is set to fix something or to do something. But when you have like 10, 15 minutes break and you throw a question, say, let's talk. Like today, I'll be open with you. I have a religious Muslim, a religious Christian who is really very tight with his religion. He doesn't want to hear about Islam. I said, okay, well, tell me about your religion. What do you believe? So he opened up and he started talking about it. So I said, can I explain my side? And he said, well, in my religion, I'm not supposed to hear your side. And he's a very good friend of mine. We play, in that time, we play, games or something with cards. I said, why not? Why can't I explain why I come from? It's good to be, it's not good to be misinformed about where I come from. And we've been friends for 10 years. Let me explain he believed in James' Bible, so it's so strict. And I said, okay, well, let me explain what Muhammad is, what the Prophet is, what the religion is. So we started the conversation. We opened up a little window, so he understood where I come from, and I understood where he come from. So we started this dialogue today, actually, matter of fact.
Wow, all right. May it continue. Wow. Anything else?
I'll just quickly add, I think it really makes me sad to hear that because it takes practice. I mean, to shut the opportunity down right, even before it starts is a shame because it takes practice to let go of the ego that wants you to be right. And if I'm right, then someone that has to be wrong. That's really what the problem is, right? Yeah. To shed that need to be right, it takes practice, it takes evolution, it takes, you know, it's a thing we do as we move through life. And if young people are not even going to have the conversation, then they'll never get there, really. You know, it's really being able to shed that sense of, I know I have the answers, I'm right, and therefore you're wrong, that keeps us in that place in our world of disconnect from each other and misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. So beautiful. I'm sad that it's too bad that they're signing these agreements.
Needs to join another group. This is not
One more comment or question.
I'd like to say something about the same subject, but really from a different angle. I've lived in Vermont for about 40 years, so I'm really want to talk about Vermont. But I grew up in New York City, and New York City is supposed to be the melting pot. All groups from all over come there, and it's the place where everybody is, quote, welcome and mixes and so forth. But when I first came to Vermont, as a young adult, I guess, I realized that Vermont is really way more tolerant than New York City was, because back in New York City, each group, each ethnic group, each religion, at least at that time, lived in their own area. And they were a little bit like what your friend was. Well, you're a nice person, but I'm not supposed to find out about your religion, or I shouldn't really be mixing with you. And in the borough that I lived in Brooklyn, the kids who were Catholic, most of them went to parochial school, and those who weren't went to public school. So there was a totally missed opportunity for different groups to even meet or get to know each other. But coming to Vermont, I found that there was no sense of separation. This feeling of live and let live just really blew me away and made me feel immediately more at home here than I did in the place that I grew up.
Thank you.
So Vermont may be the least, quote, religious state, but I think it's maybe the most tolerant state and the most open to this kind of a dialogue.
Well, it's interesting. It also, this country, I mean, Christianity is very dominant, and I'm sure that you feel that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So
I would say, you know, we have a great interfaith with all the other religions in our mosque. We've been visited from the synagogue from Montpelier, from the ski area. Stowe. Thank you. I couldn't think of it for some reason. David, yes, they visit us. We have a lot of school and colleges who visit the mosque, and we explain to them what the religion is, the basic of Islam, and I see a lot of Vermonters now have accepted different faith, and what they want to listen. They want to know where you come from. What kind of, can you explain to me what Islam is? Maybe explain me what Catholic is or Jewish. So I think they are open to that idea. This is something, a new phenomenon I've been noticing lately.
I'm hopeful.
Small piece?
Yes.
In the beginning, we were told the similar thing, like religion is, you should not be talking about religion when we came here. And then when we said the word Hindu, when we wanted to keep the word Hindu in the temple, a lot of our friends, even the educated friends, were really scared. Let us not write that. Let us say spiritual or something like. And then we thought about, we discussed about it, the name of it, and we wanted to make make it acceptable for a lot of people, not just Bhutanese or just Nepali or Hindu only. We said, okay, let us keep Vermont Hindu Temple, so that it belongs to Vermont. So that anybody, whoever goes to another state can really feel proud that we have also a Vermont Hindu temple in Vermont, so it's ours. So that's how we kept the name. We struggled to keep the name Hindu also in the beginning.
Very interesting. So I'd like to close with, if any of you have something burning you'd still like to say, which I'm sure there's again a boatload, but something, and then I would like each of you to offer up a prayer or a chant or what you have come with. Are there any say, or can we begin to close?
Yeah, we can close.
And also know there's a reception, there's wonderful Shelburne Farms cheese, and and I'm sure these folks will stick around if you have other questions or comments. I found this a fascinating and wonderful conversation, and I think it would be wonderful to close with whatever you have brought. So I know that you have brought someone from your temple to, should we start there?
Yeah. So before that, I just want to say one line.
Okay.
Let us feel comfortable to talk uncomfortable things.
Yes, yes, thank you. Excellent.
So let's begin the dialogue from that platform. Thank you.
Okay. Does that make, but you
Sorry.
need to unhook you.
Oh, so should we come together?
Or maybe,
They can come here and join.
why don't we do yours last, so they can all come
Okay.
up.
Sure.
So we'll start actually
Yeah.
with Melissa. Is
Mine
that all
doesn't
right?
require any movement.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So they can come, you can stay,
Okay.
and that can be
Yeah.
the audio.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I chose actually, I guess you could call it a poem written by Hermann Hesse. I'm sure most of you know, wrote a number of books, Siddhartha being one of them, one of my favorite pieces of literature. It's called Stages, and I chose it when I was sort of trying to think of what this might be for me. I kept coming back to it because this is a piece that has informed me on my journey, and I go back to it over and over again because it allows me to remember that it's not about the little minutia of what religion or faith is, or even what being a human being is. There's a much bigger picture, and this piece of writing is what puts me there. Stages. As every flower fades and as all youth departs, so life at every stage, so every virtue, so our grasp of truth blooms in its day and may not last forever. Since life may summon us at every age, be ready, heart, for parting, new endeavor. Be ready bravely and without remorse to find new light that old ties cannot give. In all beginnings dwells a magic force for guiding us and helping us to live. Serenely, let us move to distant places and let no sentiments of home retain us. The cosmic spirit seeks not to restrain us, but lifts us stage by stage to wider spaces. If we accept a home of our own making, familiar habit makes for indolence. We must prepare for parting and leave-taking, or else remain the slaves of permanence. Even the hour of our death may send us speeding onto fresh and newer spaces, and life may summon us to newer races. So be it, heart, bid farewell without end.
Melissa O'Brien, thank you very much. Taysir.
Can I call for a prayer, a chant?
Yes,
This is
please.
what we do it 5 times a day.
Please.
So it is kind of in Arabic, but I will explain in English at the end.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect. Do you need us to do anything?
No,
Maybe
you
in
can
the
just sit where you are.
Okay.
So it's going to take a couple of minutes. So it's going to be in Arabic, as you know. This is how we call for prayer.
Okay.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. So what it means, God is great. Probably you hear that a lot. God is great, God is great. There is only one God, and Prophet Muhammad is prophet, and all other prophets as well. Come to prayer. Come to prayer. Come to be successful. Come to be successful. There's only one God, and God is great.
Taysir Al-Khatib, thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
bringing that and you here today.
So Friday night, of course, is the first night of Passover, when we are reminded to imagine that we ourselves were slaves and engage in the archetypical story of being bound up to freedom. No matter what we do, we want to serve in joy. So, Ivdu et Hashem besimcha bo elafanav birnana. Serve God with joy and come dancing with great song. And so I'll sing one version of this. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo elafanav birnana, lefanav birnana. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, lefanav birnana. Yalalai, 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 yalalai.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Serve in joy.
Rabbi Jan Sazman, thank you very much. And why don't I move my
we
seat?
can move,
And
yeah.
your gentlemen, would you like to come up? If I stay.
All
Okay.
This is a prayer we normally start for any occasion to make it successful, and wishing everybody good health, prosperity, and all good things. And let there be peace in mind, tranquility in the environment, and let God protect you and be with you every time. So that is the basic interpretation of this thing, this chant. Thank you. Tameva mata champita tameva
Tameva bandhosta sakha tameva Tameva vidya dravidam tameva Tameva sarvam mama deva deva Janmadasya yatunvayadi taratastharthesha vigya swarat Tene brahmaridaya adi kavaye mohyanti yatsuraya Tejo barimridam vyatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha Dhamna svena sada nirasta kohakam satyam param dhimahi Om swasti na indro bridasravaha Swasti na pokha vishvavedaha Swasti na staraksho arishtanemihi Swasti no brihaspatir dadhatu Om Devho Shantirantariksha Gung Shanti Prithivi Shantirapah Shantirokhadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shantir Vishve Devaha Shantir Brahma Shanti Sarvagung Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sama Shantiredhi.
Thank you. Shanti means peace. So you have heard Shanti, Shanti, Shanti everywhere, and universe, earth, everything was included. Thank you.
Bidur Dahal, and everyone here, thank you so much for coming. And thank all of you. In 2 weeks, we will talk mediation human to human, another bridging of difference. I thank you all for coming and hope to see you then. It will be here again at All Souls. Thank you so much. You are all just fabulous. Thank you very much.